I'm recording for all the people who can't be here right now. So welcome to the Words Matter workshop. If you have had any interaction with me on social media, whether it's in a group, whether it's my group or another group, if you have had like any sort of time in my stories on Instagram, I talk about this a lot. I talk about it in terms of relationships and identity, but I also talk about it in terms of like the language that we use towards ourselves, with our self-talk and all of that kind of stuff. Those all matter. Like, not in the sense where you have to overthink everything you say, but when there's a pattern to the things we say, whether it's conscious or unconscious, it has ramifications in our life. In the context of today, we're talking about gender, inclusivity, pronouns, those kinds of things. So I want to preface this with I commit not to getting offended by questions, the way they're worded, even if the language is problematic for me as an LGBTQ person. What I've decided before coming into this that I will choose not to be harmed by anything. So I made that energetic boundary because if you're here now, or if you're watching the playback, you're not intentionally harming anyone. So I'm not going to take that on, okay? At the same time, there's going to be things that I say that might not offend you, but they are going to be like, oh, really? I don't know if I agree with that. And that is okay. That is fine. Let's just promise not to take anything personally today and to be here with an open heart and an open mind and allow discussion and conversation and questions to take place. I have set a timer for 60 minutes. So I am allowing for 30 minutes of questions if they're needed, or discussion, or revisiting something that I've spoken about. At the same time, I can just keep talking. I could teach like a weekend retreat on this. I could go for days because it really is important. So in your workbooks, I asked a question, where are you on the spectrum of inclusivity? And I feel like by the end of tonight, you will know more clearly where you are. So what I mean by that, the spectrum of inclusivity, is people who are like, oh, I love everyone, but their behavior doesn't look any different than the norm. And then there's people who are like out there, they are learning about land acknowledgements, like I'm teaching to you from the traditional unceded territories of the Snuneymuxw people. It's unceded means that they never gave it up. So the fact that we're all building houses here means we took it from them. So there's that. And that, like, knowing that means that I recognize inclusion of Indigenous people. There's like a whole level and spectrum of it, right? So like lifting a Black, marginalized, Indigenous, and people of color's voices over my own because I have a much higher level of privilege than them, even though I'm LGBTQ, right? So there's like a whole spectrum of inclusivity where you include everyone, or you include some people, or nobody. So we learn where we are, if we're just educating ourselves, if we're trying, if we're an ally, if we're an advocate, and then if we're an amplifier. So when you get to an amplifier, you love people, you accept them, you celebrate them, but you also lift them up. So instead of sharing with somebody what you know about queer people or Indigenous people or people of color, you would point them to someone who's already doing the work. You'd be like, oh, you need to read this book by this person, or oh, you need to follow this person on social media. I've learned so much from them. That's the difference between like an ally and an advocate and an amplifier. And an amplifier is all of those things usually. Some people are just foghorns, you know what I'm saying? I mean, what? That doesn't describe me at all. So one of the number one biggest questions I've got from everyone is it okay to refer to people using gender neutral pronouns if you don't know what they are or if you can't tell. Here's your first challenging point. You can never tell a person's pronouns just by looking at them unless they have a pin or name tag or a tattoo. I don't know if people are doing that yet. That says what they are. You can't know. So it's totally fine to refer to people as they, them. That's pretty standard. You do it when you don't even realize you do it. So like, it's like, hey, where's so-and-so? Oh, they went to go get the mail. We don't always use gendered pronouns, but we don't think about it when we don't, right? So it's fine to use they, them pronouns until they tell you what their pronouns are for sure. It's best not to assume anyone's, and it's not rude to ask for them privately or on an intake form. It becomes tricky when you're in a public place that a queer person might not feel safe in. So we'll get to that a little bit more when I talk about like outing people and stuff. So you can ask things like, do you use specific pronouns? What are your pronouns? What pronouns should I call you? What language can I use when addressing you? We often overcomplicate it and think it's rude to ask people something that's part of their identities as much as their name. So like when you introduce yourself to someone and you're like, oh, hi, I'm Jill. You could switch it up and be like, hi, I'm Jill. I use she, her pronouns. And that automatically would allow anyone who uses non-cis pronouns to tell you themselves, right? Oh, there's a dog barking behind me. Anyway, that's a thing. So I find in the thing of like intake forms, because a lot of us are doing business online, whether we're running personal services or like I know Deborah Lynn sends like stuff to like people's houses from stores and stuff. And a lot of those forms on selling platforms are automated to like Mr., Ms., Mrs., the end. It's really annoying. So whenever possible, I try to take those off because that can be really triggering for people. For medical type things, sometimes you need to know someone's sex, but if you're not a gynecologist, you probably don't actually need to know it because it's irrelevant unless you're treating them for infertility or you're dealing with their uterus or you're dealing with their prostate. Unless it comes up, it's not important and they'll disclose themselves. So I do recommend just including in forms in personal businesses a pronoun spot. Just be like, name, pronoun. You don't even have to ask someone's gender because your gender and your pronouns aren't the same thing. I know cis men who have started using what's called a neo pronoun. So regular pronouns are she, her, he, him, they, them. Then they've started having neo pronouns like these are. So X, E, X, I, R. There's a whole list. I will send them to you. I know cisgendered men, so men who were assigned male at birth and identify as male, who use those pronouns because they're like, screw you, toxic masculinity. I'm going to change my pronouns and not be a part of this macho culture. And I think that's really cool. The second really important question that I got was, as a mom, there's going to be a lot of parents watching this video. It's important for me to be able to speak about things openly and confidently, like gender diversity with my daughter. Do you have any tips? Because kids automatically go boy or girl, because that's all they've seen and heard, right? The number one tip I can say with like children and minors is who in their life is gender diverse already? Is there anyone? What kind of children's programming are they watching? What kind of children's books are they watching? Because I promise you they are out there and they're becoming more and more and more mainstream. I have friends who are authors who have written children's books where there's two moms or two dads or a they, them kid. Like they exist and they can be found. The best thing that we can do as grown-ups and as mentors and as role models for kids is to just do it ourselves. Just use gender neutral language whenever possible, expose them safely to different kinds of people, and correct them in a way that's gentle. Like, anyone can play with that toy. Toys are for everybody. Anyone can wear a dress. Dresses are for anybody. Anyone can, drive trucks. Anyone, like, you can just totally correct it. Just being like, well, anyone can do it. You're a girl and you're doing it. Boys can do it too. Some people aren't a girl or a boy and they can do it. Kids get it. They get it. We overcomplicate it. A child understands things far easier than we do. Okay. This is a tough one. How do I include everyone without excluding anyone? This is our heart, right? We want everyone to feel welcome. We want everyone to feel included. This is where you have to separate your business from you if you feel called to serve women. If you feel called to serve men. You can't include everyone without excluding everyone unless you want every gender, every age in your space. Like, you can't. You're not being rude to say, I only serve women, unless your definition of women doesn't include trans women. That's where inclusive language is important. So Casey, who's going to be watching this later, doesn't know I'm talking about her, so haha, has done a great job of this, and most people in her spaces didn't notice, except those who were there when her and I were talking about it. She's taken most of the gendered language out of her teaching and out of her greetings on social media. She's almost completely stopped saying, hey guys, or hey ladies. She just says, hey everyone, or hi. And she's worked really hard at it. Unless it's necessary, like she's talking about masculine and feminine energy, which those are the terms for it in our line of work right now. Until those terms get redefined on a global level, people know what it means. And so those are the ones that are used. But in her space now, even though it's called As She Rises and has a she right there, because her teaching isn't full of like so much gendered language, I, as a non-binary person, feel so welcome and not alienated that place is basically my living room. Like, I hang out there, everyone there is like my friends, and I don't think I've been misgendered by anyone who actually knows me in that group at all, like at all. And usually when it happens, it's totally by accident. They're like, way to go, sister, or yeah, lady. And I'm like, not a lady. I mean, like, even if I were a girl, I wouldn't want to be called a lady. Hated that my whole life. Anyway, that's besides the point. So we can't be inclusive while being exclusive. You can include more people, you can be mindful of your language, but you can't completely be inclusive, and that's okay. In your business, in your life is a different story, right? So this is where there's like two dichotomies, because there's like nothing wrong with serving women. The end, full stop. It only becomes a problem if you don't include trans people in there. The other part of that question that I want to touch on is someone had asked, let me just find it. They had asked about keeping non-binary people in there. Like, how do I include non-binary people without women who have been harmed, like traumatically, by men feeling uncomfortable? This is where you have to decide whether or not you want to be inclusive, because not everyone, I'm going to say this frankly, not everyone with a penis is a man, and not everyone with a penis has hurt a woman, and not every woman has a vulva. It's time to break those from our understanding of gender. If where you draw the line at who's safe and who's not is people who present outwardly as feminine. That is homophobic, that is transphobic, and it isn't inclusive. So you have to decide what's more important, is keeping your current client roster exactly as it is, or being completely inclusive of women and non-binary people or not. There's nothing wrong, again, with saying you serve just women or just men. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you include femme-presenting non-binary people and exclude masc-presenting non-binary people, or you exclude trans women, that is problematic. And we can talk about that privately if you would like to. I would absolutely love to, because there's a lot to unpack, because we're taught, and that's one of the documentaries I recommended. It's really hard to watch. Full disclosure, it is really triggering and really hard to watch. But the documentary Disclosure is all about how we've been trained since film started to be afraid of trans people, especially trans women, and especially trans women of color. 80% of Americans don't personally know a trans person that they're aware of. So if we don't know them and we're not hanging out with them, how can we include them and not be suspicious, right? So like that is one of the hard list things, is do you include trans people in your definition of gender? Do you believe that trans women are women? And if so, and you market to women, you need to include that in your messaging somewhere and bluntly. So if you have a Facebook group like I do, and it says right on my group that all genders are welcome, that homophobia and transphobia is not tolerated at all, and I spell it out really quickly, and I enforce that safe space with an iron fist, I will give people an opportunity to apologize, to correct the behavior, and then they're gone because they agree when they come in. And I've had to remove a couple of people, but for the most part, it's been an amazing space. We have men in there, we have gay men in there, we have trans people in there, we have non-binary people in there, and it's just starting to get to where people are sharing, because this isn't the norm right now. The norm is that trans and non-binary people go into women's spaces because they're less threatening than spaces where cis men are. We can all probably agree on that. And then people say horrific things, and nobody stands up against them. So the number one way that you can be inclusive is to be obvious about who you support in your messaging and on your social media. Another question was, I market to women because men don't understand the complex nuances of being a woman in business. True. So true. Leaving our gender means potentially making my space available to all and less safe for women. We're kind of open to serving men with open hearts and minds. So this is where I get confused about how to include everyone while still holding a safe space. So this goes back to what I was just talking about. Are you feeling called to include everyone, or are you shoulding yourself because of what people might think? You can be inclusive of everyone personally and serve women or men or queer people in your business, like we were just talking about, but there is no way to be wholly inclusive and exclude men. There isn't. Just because you deem trans men to be safe doesn't mean you can lump them in with women, because that is so transphobic. You're basically saying, oh, you're not a real man, so you can be, or you're not a real woman, so you can be in this space. You're not a real man, so you can be in this space. It's like horrific. Can you imagine walking up to a trans man and being like, oh, you're trans? You're fine. You can come into this women's group. Like, trans men are men. Trans women are women. That is the thing that we have to ingrain into our brains in order to be inclusive. How can I continue to learn to do better when it comes to using the correct pronouns and being inclusive? Just try. Did you learn to drive when you first started, or speak, or walk, or ride a bike? If you did, I hate you. Sorry, there's a forest fire over there, so there's like a helicopter going overhead. No big deal. This is my life. How do we use the right language to be inclusive? What is the right language? What is the right language? How do you know that? You just have to ask people. We're so afraid to make a mistake that we're not making action at all. Like, as a collective group, especially white people, RIP, and cisgender people, so afraid to offend that we don't even try. I can tell you that queer people can tell when you're trying. They can absolutely tell. Absolutely tell. Okay, if someone is struggling with their pronouns, is there a default to use? This is a really good question. So, like, if you have a friend or a loved one, or like a kid, whatever, or maybe your partner who is thinking they might be working through their gender identity and they're not sure what they want to be called, there's so many ways to tackle this. First of all, it's their decision. So even though we're healers and we want to fix, it's their decision. Go away, Wasp. You're not invited. I'm allergic to you. Bye. Go. Anyway. Okay. So, you can try to offer different ones and see which ones are like full ew, no. Because often we know what we don't like. We know what doesn't resonate, what doesn't fit well. But we're not sure what feels good, especially in a binary world where everyone's like girl, boy, man, woman. There's so much in between, and there's so much beauty that can be had in the fluidity. Even in between the binaries of like good and bad, hot and cold, rough and structured, there's so much beauty in the in-between. Gender is the same thing. It exists more. A lot of people talk about spectrum theory, but I think more in terms of like a nebula. So if you want to like go home and look on Google Images and see like a cool nebula where it kind of moves a little, but it's mostly the same shape, and there's all these stars and stuff, and the gas connects everything, but the stars are separate. That's more what gender is like than a line with male on one end and female on the other. No. So my favorite thing to do with kids, especially when they're not sure, kids never know what they want anyway. I'm a puppy. I'm cotton candy. I want to be an astronaut. I wanna be a janitor. Like, they see someone doing something in a cool outfit and they want to do it. So you could get them different stickers that have different pronouns on them, and they could wear them for a week or two, and then they'll know if they don't like it, and people will call them by that pronoun. You get them a pin if they're old enough so they don't like poke themselves and I don't know, whatever. There's nothing wrong in that. And let's get rid of this language of struggling. We don't struggle with our gender. The thing we struggle with is finding the terms to define it in a culture where they haven't previously existed. My gender has always been my gender. My sexual orientation has always been my sexual orientation. Learning the language to describe it is what has been the journey, especially when people were being like, no, don't be that. No, don't say that. No, don't do that. We're now in this time in history where we can explore certain things more openly with less fear of retaliation. So the struggle in society comes with the pressure to be right or be a certain thing. I have gender fluid friends who use he, she, they interchangeably, depending on how they're feeling in that day. And they don't get offended when anyone calls them any pronoun because they use them all. They don't care, right? And then there's other people who are like, I'm just this. And they're like, cool, thanks. Removing the pressure to get it right is so helpful. Depending on their age, they could just try them all. Like Pokemon, I don't know. Okay. How are we doing? Is anyone like, oh my gosh, this is too much. I need to like take a breath or something. We're okay? how can I make sure I'm not being offensive when I'm addressing someone? Well, you can't make yourself 100% sure you're not being offensive. Sometimes my personality is offensive, but you can be welcoming, you can be affirming, and you can just openly state that you freely welcome correction, that you're new and you're learning and you're evolving. And if I use a word or a phrase that makes you uncomfortable or harms you in any way, please let me know so that I never use it in reference to you again. It's like, we're all going to make mistakes. I say dumb shit all the time. All the time. And I don't even know it sometimes because I was raised with straight white people. So I say straight white people shit all the time. And we are the most offensive people on the human planet. Just saying. How do you know what someone's pronoun is? Is it okay to ask? Absolutely. What do I do if I mess up? This is the most important question that I could answer that you could take away tonight. Okay, so have you ever forgiven someone for something and they just won't let it go? They just keep bringing it up, and then it makes you mad at them again and re-traumatizes you again, and it's so annoying because you've forgiven them and they keep asking you for forgiveness, and you're like, why don't you trust me and believe me and just leave me alone? That's what happens when you misgender someone and then you apologize, and then they're like, okay, whatever. You know, some people will say it's okay because they just want you to go away. Most people will be like, thank you, these are my pronouns, and then other people will just ghost you and eventually stop talking to you because it's annoying. So you just say thank you and try to use the new ones. Not, oh my God, I'm so sorry, that was so awful, that was so horrible of me, and like text on them for 25 minutes about what a terrible person you are and how you'll try so much better next time, because I guarantee you 50 other people have already had that conversation with them that day. So just correct yourself and move on. It's just so easy. And you're going to make mistakes. You're going to keep making mistakes. The point is how do you handle them yourself? These ones are Beachbody specific because I don't know if you know this, but I'm a Beachbody coach, and some people who signed up for the replay are watching this. So how do I create an inclusive challenge group? So for those of you who do any sort of a group fitness or group self-improvement, this is the same thing. Creating an inclusive challenge group. Again, you have to decide who you're including. If it's everybody, I would suggest finding a coach, another expert, a co-leader, or your like top hype people to be from each of the groups. So get a queer person who's like a hype person, and get a man who's a hype person, and then have a woman who's a hype person. And if you're really concerned about your posting, run your posts by them before you post them, or assign them some posting is a really good idea. So decide who you're including, who you're for. It's just like when we're niche marketing, okay? This is the same thing. You can't include people for the sake of inclusion, or it won't ring true. So who are you here to serve? Who is here to be coached by you? And create all your content around that, being mindful that everyone might see the advertisement. So I try to be like, not to be like, hey ladies, I'm running a challenge group. I would just be like, I'm running a challenge group. We're going to do this program. It's from this time to this time. Because people who know me, they know who my audience is because they're in it. You know, I have yet to have a cisgendered heterosexual male apply for anything that I do at all, because I'm too gay and it creeps them out. It's fine. It is what it is. They're just like, this is too witchy. This is too rainbowy. This is, I do not feel comfortable and safe, and that is okay. They'd be welcome if they came, but it's not for them. That's not who my target audience is. My target audience is queer people first, because they don't have a lot of spaces that are just for them, and then anyone who loves them. That's a pretty big audience. So that is how I would start with that. The other question that was in this is, what are the most common concerns or questions asked about Beachbody? So the most, until recently, in all fitness platforms, the biggest complaint that the queer community had was that there weren't any people like them teaching the program. And that is starting to change, and it's starting to change in a big way. And it's not because there weren't any queer people out, it's because there weren't any out queer people. A lot of companies are putting the minority people, for whatever reason, I'd like to hope it's not just marketing, but they're putting them all at the front and center, and that is really cool. It's really remarkable. So as far as that goes, the biggest question is like, there's no one like me. Why should I purchase this? There's no one like me. Why should I join this group? There's no one like me. How could you possibly understand what I'm going through? How am I going to find clothing to work out in that affirms my gender without feeling super uncomfortable? Until recently, the language in a lot of fitness classes, both in person and online, are very gendered. It's either geared towards ladies, moms. Not everyone who gives birth is a mom. We could just say parents. We could just say after having a baby. We don't have to gender the parent. And people wouldn't even notice. Moms wouldn't notice as much if you said after having a baby, these are the muscles you need to strengthen. They wouldn't feel less of a mom. But the person in the room who has had a child, who has given birth, but doesn't identify as female, is going to have a hard time with that, right? So these are the things to consider. The most common concerns, I think, is how other people in the challenge group are going to respond to them being there. And then I can't see the chat. Where is the chat? I think postpartum should be fine, because I would defer to someone who's maybe like a trans man and has had a baby, but I feel like postpartum is fine because it's not inherently a gendered term. Like, it's more medical. Yeah, I feel like it would be fine. Anything that has to do with body parts, like specific physical language, is really helpful. Like, how many times have you been watching an online workout and they talk about ladies' time of the month? Like, it's referenced that way. Why can't we just say menstruation? Why can't we just say menstrual cycle? Why can't we just say uterus? Why can't we just, why are we afraid as grown adults, when people have to be 18 years or older to use the service? Why can't we use proper language? Why are we afraid of saying penis? Like, it's not a bad word. It's a body part. It's like my nose. It exists. So getting over that stigma would be incredibly helpful for those kinds of things. Okay. And then, what personal development resources would you recommend that I learn from? Honestly, the best place that you can learn about queer people and how to include them is to read really sad biographies written by queer people who have overcome. Like, it sounds depressing, but there's no amount of self-help that is going to teach you respect for minorities except to learn their stories. So if you're not surrounded by queer people, your best bet is the library section with all the biographies. And I don't mean Ellen DeGeneres. That's another topic. She's a trash human being. But there are just like normal people who have written books that are in the biography section. Also, here it's chapters. So down in the States, I don't know, it would be Barnes and Noble or something, like the big book chain. Go to a small bookstore. But at the big book chain, you could go to like gender studies. Like, they usually lump in the LGBTQ plus and gender studies in the same section in most bookstores. There's going to be tons of stuff there, especially if they have a youth section. I find that if you read the stuff that's targeted for teenagers, the language is a lot simpler and it's way less overcomplicated. What are some absolute do not hardliners of the LGBT conversation? One is do not dead name someone. So if someone changes their name in the queer community and you know what their name used to be, don't ever say it again. Ever. Unless they give you permission to call them by that name, don't do it. It's rude. It's so rude. And then the other one is like, don't out someone. So this is very important. Outing happens by accident. And I've done it by accident and had someone message me and be like, you just outed them. And then I just went and deleted the comment and I didn't make a big deal about it. That is how you handle that situation on social media. But unless somebody you know is very publicly out and very well known, like everybody knows they're gay, everybody knows they're trans, like everybody knows, that's not your job to tell anyone, especially with trans people. That's partly what the documentary Disclosure is about, is that forcing trans people to tell people that they're trans is violence, because all you're doing is forcing them to tell people whether or not their genitals match their gender. And that is so rude. It's assault. You don't walk up to strangers on the street and ask them what kind of bits they have. So why do we need to know if someone's trans or not? That if you're a woman, you're a woman. If you're a man, you're a man. If you're gender nonconforming, cool, rock it. I don't need to know all the details, and I won't tell someone else's story. I will just be like, go ask them. Like, or that's a good question is one of my favorite things when someone's like, hey, are they trans? That's a good question, because you're not saying yes, you're not saying no, you're just like, go ask them. That's none of my business. How do we create a safe space for our own children should it come to light that they are LGBTQ+? Why don't we start raising children like they're queer and have them pleasantly surprise us that they're heterosexual? What would happen then? Just kidding. Just let the kid be a kid. If the safest space to begin with, you won't have to create a safer space because they'll just know that it's safe. Let them know that you love them, that you love everything about them, the little freckle on their ear, the way their farts stink. Like, just tell them that you love them and it won't matter. How do you teach your children to be inclusive of LGBTQ+ people? When you hear someone say something mean, turn to your child and say, we don't do that. When your child sees a man in a dress and they like the dress, tell them to tell the man it's a nice dress. It's so much easier than we try to make it. Like, we make it this big thing and it's in our head. If you want to be more inclusive and you want to model to your children, your coworkers, your peers, inclusivity, treat everyone how you want to be treated. Period. If you don't want anyone asking you about your body parts, don't ask anyone about their body parts. If you want the right to love whoever you love, help other people love whoever they love. I'm going to email this along with the video, but I'm going to post it into the chat too. One that was really good question was, how do I continue sharing sentiments of feminism and girl power without relating it only to women? I see your chat. I'd also say have a conversation in your home. I often correct and have conversations with my partner of what is this. Yeah. I mean, Olivia and I do that too, but we don't have kids. We just say to each other, we don't say that. We don't call ourselves stupid. That's not something we say. So there's a van. This is what happens when you're outside. Okay, so the link I just posted in here is from the Human Rights Commission, which is a big, it posted 2 links, that's fine. The first one is for the Human Rights Commission. if you're not aware with them, they're a nonprofit organization that strives really hard to give everyone equal opportunities and rights and freedoms in the world in general. Like they try to do it, and they're up against a lot of pressure, but they try. So the title of the article is 5 things to know to make your feminism trans inclusive. And it talks about how if trans women aren't included in every aspect of your feminism, then you're not a feminist. You're a trans exclusive radical feminist, which is not a good thing to be. The other thing I would like to suggest is that feminism isn't for women and girls. It's for everybody. It's shifted since I was little to become this polarized thing where it's not for everybody. But feminism is about taking women's voices from here and putting them here, which is what inclusivity is. Being inclusive and being a feminist are the same thing. Because if we're all not free, none of us are free. If we aren't all included, we're not inclusive. If women don't have an equal say and an equal right as literally everyone else on the table, then we're not doing inclusivity right. So that is one place that I would recommend starting. The other place I would say is find your local pride society. And if you have the time, volunteer. If you don't, just reach out and be like, hey, I want to learn how to be more inclusive. Do you know where I can learn that? Do you know where I can relearn feminism in a way that includes trans people, in a way that includes non-binary people? Because that is recognizing our privilege of not being able to see our own, I don't want to call them blind spots because that's like super ableist, but I haven't found another word for that. So if you know a better word than blind spot, please correct me. I just want to make sure I get most of these questions before I look at all the stuff that I put in the workbook. I think that, I want to be more familiar with the current terms acceptable. The resources are literally endless. Most of what I'm sharing today, I found on Google and well-known websites like GLAAD and the Human Rights Commission. Language is always changing. It's always evolving. It's always expanding, especially in English, because we just took bits of language from everywhere else and made like our own thing. It's literally colonialism verbally. Like that's what we do. We throw everything in the pot and then we're like, ta-da. So language is continually evolving. We're continually creating new terms for things. A cell phone wasn't commonplace until I was in my mid-20s. That was only 11 years ago. iPhones, apps, Wi-Fi, all of these words are relatively new. And they're continually inventing new ones all the time to describe things that we didn't have language for before. And gender is the same way. If you get into intercultural studies in any way, there are entire tribal peoples that live in like South America and in Africa that have more than 4 distinct genders inherent in their culture. And they look at us like we're weird. Okay. So learning to just expand with education, it's a lifelong process. You're never going to get it right. On that note, someone asked where they can learn about the history of LGBTQ language and verbiage and how has it evolved. And I said, there is not enough time, even if I ran a 9-hour in-depth deep dive into the semantics and linguistics and the, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not phonetics. It's similar to that. I'm a creative writing and journalism major, and I took English literature, and I have a bachelor's degree in biblical studies. So I know about classical literature, and I know about the trajectory of language and where it comes from. I also spent a hot minute with translators who create phonetic languages for people that don't have a written one. So I couldn't teach that in this amount of time. That is a much deeper thing. There are people who spend 10 years writing thesis on stuff like that. So I absolutely would recommend doing some self-study on that topic. If there is an interest for anyone watching this now or the playback later in learning about the evolution of LGBTQ plus language, please, please, please email me and I will figure out how to put that together, but it will take me time. We're talking, it probably wouldn't be until the spring because I would have to build it. But I would be willing to if there was enough people interested in taking it because it would be really cool. I would learn a bit about myself too, probably. But I would absolutely love to take that on for you. Okay. So we're sitting close to 7. So we've been chatting for almost an hour. I want to get you to do an exercise. Whether you're watching now or you're watching the playback, I want you, if you have your phone near you or a laptop or a tablet, to go to one of your social media accounts and see how many LGBTQ plus people you follow. And I don't mean this in a weird way. I want you to be aware that you can't be inclusive of someone inside of your business that isn't already inclusive inside of your little sphere of influence. For me, I did this exercise with Olivia and I was like, yeah, that stands. My following and the people that I follow are about a 70-30 split between white, cis, straight people. So for anyone who's at this point is like, why does she keep saying cis? Cisgender is just the gender you were assigned at birth that you agreed with it. That's all that means. That's all that means. It just means it never changed. That's all. It's like saying original Pringle. Same diff. It's the same thing. So if you do the audit, and maybe you have too many people following you and you following them to do the audit, but this is a good thermometer, I guess. Deb, I follow 3,000 people. Deb, I'd like to say that you're safe because you like and comment on a lot of the content that I like and comment on, and they're either Indigenous people, queer people, or witches who are either married or parents to queer people. So I feel like you're safe. You know, I just don't want any of us to be a silo. Queer witches, yes, exactly. Witches. I should put that on a shirt. It'll be fine. So I would like to encourage you to follow some new people. Go ahead and snoop my social media feed. I'm giving you permission to stalk who I follow. You will see that there's a lot of Vancouver Island businesses. You will see that there are a few celebrities. Most of them are either ridiculous or hilarious. I don't do anything in between. There's a lot of sustainability. I follow a lot of Indigenous people because I'm Métis and my partner is of Coast Salish heritage, which is where we're from. So yes, even though I have this nice alabaster skin, I graduated from the Indigenous Students Program at my university. So I did put in your booklet, I got my little book on here, the Jeffrey Marsh and Mick Darren. That's how you pronounce MX. It's pronounced Mick. There are 2 of my favorite non-binary people because, well, you'll see. If you're not following them already, you'll see. They're so sweet, and they're so sweet at dealing with people who are kind of quite horrible to them, actually. So when someone's horrible to them on purpose, they'll take a screenshot of it and they'll go onto their Instagram account and onto their TikTok, and they'll talk to people who do that by accident and explain why it's not okay. And sometimes they do it quite honestly, and sometimes they just sarcastically rake them over the coals. And we realize how powerful our words are every time they do it. It's amazing. Okay. If you printed your booklet, cool. If not, I'm going to read this after everything I've talked about, and then I'm going to rewrite it to you in my own language, non-gendered. Welcome. This group is for female entrepreneurs who want to help others prosper and share their successes and to lift each other up. Women Helping Women Entrepreneurs was created as a vehicle through which women can help other women in the most important areas of their lives, business, personal growth, balancing family and career. The goal is to provide women with the resources, the tools they need to prosper and succeed. If this group is only for women, I would still edit it to remove the word female. And here's why. Female, when it's on a form and it says male or female, has to do with sex, your genitalia. It can be incredibly triggering for a trans person to have to fill out a form that says male or female on it. If you get rid of that and you just say this is a group for women entrepreneurs, that's fine. But the fact that it says women 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times makes me feel like trans people aren't welcome in that circle. Because feminists who exclude trans people really like to prove that they're the only women that are women. So they use women a lot in all of their rhetoric. Like a lot, because they have a trademark on that word and no one else is allowed to use it. Like, it's really bad. So if I were to write this in an inclusive space, say it was for women and non-binary folks, I would say, welcome. This group is for entrepreneurs who feel safe in traditionally female spaces or in traditionally feminine spaces. Like you could pick one word that would be traditionally for women. This is for you. And then you just say, we're helping one another. You don't have to say women helping women entrepreneurs. Like it's bad grammar anyway. But we're helping one another through our lives, business, personal growth, balancing family and career. You can keep that exactly the same. The goal is to provide a safe space with the resources, tools, and skills we need to prosper and succeed. It's still the same vision. It's still the same tenets. And there's hardly any gendered language in there. The goal isn't to like erase gender. Gender still exists. The goal is to provide space for people to feel included and still be true to your brand. So, unintentional gender language that I use in my social media. Do this homework later and circle all that apply if you haven't done it already. Hey guys, you guys, ladies, girls, sisters, sisterhood, sorority, goddess, queen, king, prince, men and women, when you mean everyone, mom and dad, when you mean parents, brothers and sisters, when you mean siblings, and she, her, and hers. So I left a lot of spiritual guidance and healing spaces for a while when I first came out, because everything was about gender. People were calling me sister all the time, or mama all the time, or saying yes, queen all the time. They were constantly telling me to awaken my inner goddess. I'm like, why can't we just say deity? Why does it have to be goddess all the time? Like, I don't know. For me, that was really hard because I spent so much time killing that part of me that I didn't want to resurrect it from the dead and walk around like a zombie in a dress. Like, it just had no appeal to me at all. But maybe it's if it's essential to your brand, I'm not telling you to get rid of it. I'm just telling you to consider where you are on the scope of inclusion in your business and where you are in your life. It's kind of gross to refer to women as females in a non-medical context. It's like I'm an animal. Yeah, I would say so. But even in a medical context, people don't need to. You can just ask, like, a doctor can ask me what body parts I have because they need to know how to medically treat me. Everyone else is none of their business. That's a good point, Timberland. I'm like trying to find the next page on this app and it's not letting me swipe. Okay. Okay, so non-binary folks are not female and they're not male, which messes with people's brains. You don't have to understand people to accept them. I don't have to understand a parent to know that it's hard to be a parent. I don't have to have my own child to know that it's hard to be in charge of a tiny human's life for the rest of their existence. I don't have to be hard, like, I don't have to know that. You don't have to understand every nuance of every kind of gender, of every kind of queer word and experience to be a safe place of welcome. You don't have to understand all of the exact right terminology, the do and don't, the correct way to include in order for people to know that you care and that you want to continue to evolve and to grow. All I can ask for in a solid ally and in a safe place is someone who I know loves me, I know has my back, and I know will tell horrible people to go away. Because we're fighting every day of our life just to be respected. So if somebody takes a little bit of that off of our plate, it gives us the opportunity to rest, to have joy, to actually let our guard down a little bit. Jill has seen me transform in the last few months. For everyone watching the video later, Jill is here live, and I'm wearing her hat because it's cool, because I like hats. And she watched me transform from where I would just leave a video to where I was like, wait, they don't actually know they're being offensive. I can help with this. And everyone's heart was for me. And once I understood that, it created this little buffer zone of grace. So saying I have a heart for inclusion and I'm open to correction is a great place to start. Whether you say those exact words out loud or whether you use something else, totally fine. So my timer went off, which means we have about 20 minutes left. I would love to invite you to chat, ask questions. If you have specific language, tourist. If you have specific language you'd like me to look at while I'm here, please do. I'm coughing from allergies. It's fine. Don't worry. I don't have the COVID. Thank you so much for being here, Jill.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. When someone misgenders someone else to you, so say a friend is talking to me and they're calling someone who goes by they, them pronouns, she, her repeatedly. Do I correct them?
Yes.
Okay.
You could just say it. So like, this happens to me and Olivia all the time because in our sphere, we're surrounded by people who are constantly coming out I work for the Pride Society. People are constantly coming out around me, and then I have to learn a new name and a new pronoun, and it's ridiculous. Anyway, so whenever someone I know is like says she, her, and the person is a he, him, or they, them, so they'll be like she, and I'll just be like he every time they say it, every single time they say it, until they get it. Every time. I don't make a big deal about it unless it's clear that they're doing it on purpose. They're just like they. Yeah, they said that. Yeah, they. Like I just do it every time, and I try not to do it in a jerk tone. And unless, and I mean, read the room. Some people are doing it on purpose, but most of the time it's just, when they change the name of a place and it's been called the same name forever, and then people like always call it that name because they grew up there, but then someone new moves there. Like, okay, so where we're from, Stephanie, there's this place called University Village. But for 112 years, okay, not that long, but like 50 years, it was called Harewood Mall. Not a mall, whatever, but that's what it was called. And so whenever I say University Village, people look at me and they're like, University Village. I'm like, that's what it says on the sign. It's the same with pronouns. People get stuck in what they're used to. So the best thing we can do for them is to just say, they. Just over and over again until they get it.
Okay. Would you recommend any different approach if it's in writing versus speaking?
If it's in writing, I would ask the person, like, are you aware that their pronouns are this?
Okay.
And if they are, be like, why are you being a transphobe? Like, I would full on just straight off. I mean, I'm also really bold and blunt, but I know that you can be too sometimes. So full permission to have one more step in there in between where you're like, did you know that it's like wrong to do that? I know in our country, it is actually borderline harassment / illegal to do that. If you know someone's pronouns are different, it's actually covered under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada not to do that. It's like psychologically damaging and borders under harassment / violence. So that's the thing. Yay, Canada, one time we got it. Thank you. Thank you for the start.
Sorry.
I mean, we're still racist as hell, but at least we protect pronouns sort of with the law. That nobody enforces ever. But it's there. Do you have any questions or thoughts or aha moments for us, Stephanie? Yeah.
I've got a few things.
Go for it. We got some time.
First question, because I've seen places where like people use it and people say, no, you can't use it because it's wrong. Women with an X instead of an E. Is there like a rule around that?
Okay, so it was for a little while, just a little while, used by queer people, and then the TERF took it. So don't use it. It's better not to, because if trans women are women and non-binary people aren't women, then we don't need an X. What's the X for?
Okay.
It's othering trans women. So it's just better not to. And then if someone asks you, you'd be like, well, I just don't feel like trans women are different than women. They're women. And then people will have to sit with that. They'll have to argue with you why you need a different letter to include women with women.
Well, at first when I seen the term, I thought it was kind of like an anti-men type of thing. So yeah, the more I read into it, I was like, yeah.
It's TERFy feminists don't like it when you call them TERF, but they're totally fine with excluding trans people. But all the word TERF means is trans exclusionary. Like it means you exclude trans women from your feminism, which makes no sense. So yeah, they've taken that phrase. There's a few other ones, like there's one with a Y. I've seen some of the older LGBTQ shops use that, because again, language is always evolving, and it used to include everyone. But even as early as like when I was in my 20s, we still said transvestite. We still said transsexual. Like those were words we still used. It's only since the late 90s that being homosexual has not been a mental illness in the book of psychology. So like all of this stuff, it's taking time to like catch up. And as it happens, it starts to morph and change. Just like the word Karen, okay? The way we use Karen and the way that we used to use Karen, now racists are using it at people who call them out for being racist in the comments on Facebook. They'll be like, stop being such a Karen. Like, that's not even how that word works, but okay. Okay, Chad. Sorry, Chad's everywhere.
Okay. And then the next one is kind of to do with what I had asked you, and I'm going to kind of
circle back
a little bit with kind of what you said earlier. So in my coaching, like my coaching is more geared towards women, like that includes trans. For me, it includes non-binary. Like I want it to be safe, but I often have this feeling that, and same thing with like the Black Lives Matter, that I'd almost rather that, say, like a trans woman, a non-binary woman invest. Like if somebody were to come to me, I would be more likely to say, hey, you know what? I feel you would be more safe with Cheryl.
Okay,
you know, like,
so I did think about this, but I didn't want to address it unless you were here. First thing, that is straight/white guilt, period. If a minority comes to you for help, they already think you're safe.
Okay.
So you're not trusting them to know their own wants, desires, needs, and minds. They see something in you that only you have, and they want it.
Okay.
Casey was a disaster when I met her. Trash fire. Just kidding, Casey. I love you. But like, she's the worst for misgendering. It was so bad. But I knew she didn't mean it. And I knew that she was learning and evolving and walking that life. And I can tell you too have that same sort of like, you just always want to know more and do better. And because of that, you might be a safer person than a queer person. Because here's the thing. I just had someone in one of the organizations that I work for ask for their membership back because they don't believe we should include trans people. And that gender confused people are ruining the entire world. And they sent us an essay about it, like a long one. And they're in the community sharing it with anyone who will listen, and a lot of people agree with them. So just because someone has a rainbow flag on their profile and offers services doesn't mean they're safe.
Okay.
Right? Does this make sense? So just trust you, but trust that the universe has your back and it will bring the people to you that need to be with you. Because it might be that you're the only one who teaches what they need the way they need to learn it.
Okay.
Right? So yeah, when you said that, I was like, oh, I've been here before. I'm like, who am I to teach whatever, anything? I did that about this. I ran away from this topic for 8 months because I was like, who am I to teach on this? I'm just like non-binary. I'm not even trans. Okay, that's not true because we're under the umbrella, but I'm like, I am just one voice. I am just one person. But all of these people are asking me for a reason. People are coming to you for a reason. You're also like super authoritative without being threatening, which is really hard vibe to have. And I hope you were born with it, because if you learned how, please teach me. because I'm super intimidating. So
Interesting.
I'm like, I have been told that I'm kind of a big deal. So.
Well, that's the first thing I said to you. I'm like, I've been wanting to reach out to you for a while. And I was just like, but it was also, like I said, you know, I would love to have you on my podcast once, like, I finally have it up. But I'm like, okay, I want to do this right. I want to properly support them in a way that, like, feels good and doesn't feel like I'm profiting. You know, like, even when I asked the question, I was like, I don't want you to feel like, okay, here's all my, like, give me all the free information. Like, okay.
But the fact that you think that means you aren't, you know, because where do we learn anything but from people? Someone put it in a book, someone put it in the internet, someone put it on a podcast. We learn by asking. But they're like asking with allowing the outcome to be like, no, I don't have the energy for this is completely different. And I feel like that's where you're at. If you were to ask me and I said no, you'd be like, okay. And then you'd like Google it and get lost in Google land for a while and then get
it in my message. Like, if you have the emotional capacity to answer me, I do that all the time. If I'm asking people, like, straight up, do you have the emotional capacity? If you do not, tell me, like, I will go elsewhere. Oh, yes.
Yeah. So permission to ask you a question about queer stuff. And then I would be like, gender, sex, sexuality. What's the question? Before I continue. Because you don't know if I've had like a day. Sometimes I've had a day, but most of the time I'm fine because I recognize that I'm a teacher. That is what I'm here to do. I'm here to teach and I'm here to guide and I'm here to coach and I'm here to help people. So that's my spiritual calling. I don't always get to pick how that arrives. That's a very good place to be. It's a very good question. Being aware of your privilege is like good, but being almost afraid of it is not, right? So it's using that privilege to amplify the voices, but amplifying the voices doesn't mean always sending people to them. Use it in your programming. Be like, I got this amazing book from this amazing thing. Use like one quote so you're not profiting on it, but you're inspiring people to go to that thing, right? So you know how people, entrepreneurs, especially coaches and mindset people, post quotes all the time, but it's always like the same two white people. It's like Gabby Bernstein and like a dude. So like, or you could like literally go follow some like actual people of color, actual queer people. And like what I do, I just post their story to my story. I just like share their posts to my feed and I don't even comment on it because I don't need to interpret what they're saying for my audience. I'm just like, here, look at this. Here, look at this. Unless I'm like, you need to go read this original post. Because I feel like that.
Go back to people's actual posts. Like whenever another group reposts it, like I'll go to the original person's post and then share it from them. Because I'm like, I want the actual person to be getting the credit.
That's amazing.
And yeah, you were talking about amplifying, and I'm like, for my podcast, like this is one of the big things that I want to make sure that I'm doing is, and you brought it up in one of your posts and you're like, okay, like LGBTQ safe is gross. Don't use that. And I'm like, because I used it in one of my hashtags for the podcast. But like, I want to have people of different walks of life come on because, like you said, you're not empowering women if you're only empowering certain women. You're not empowering everyone if you're like everyone but not you.
So like in the hashtags I would use instead, like if you want to continually draw people to yourself from all walks, I would use things like love is love, you know, trans women or women, stuff like that. I would use phrases that speak to the values that you hold rather than like taking stuff from queer communities. Does that make sense? One of the grossest things that happened last year and that happened this year was first with Black Lives Matter. Everyone put Black Lives Matter everywhere and then didn't do anything about it. I shouldn't say everyone, a lot of people. They were blacked out their social media squares. They didn't give a dime. They don't talk to racist family members about being racist. They still profit off of racism by the brands that they purchase for their homes, stuff like this. Like there's so much stuff that people do that they're not willing to take a hit on, but they can change their social media square. In Canada, the residential school children are being dug up. And after it stopped being popular because of forest fires, people stopped talking about it, even though the number's over 6,000 now. And that there's like 9 ongoing like third-party investigations right now into locations that haven't been, they haven't used radar and stuff. So there's going to be thousands more babies and nobody's talking about it. And people are still being really racist in the comment sections, and they're still being like, when are they going to stop wanting money and stuff? This is the reason not to co-opt popular hashtags from minority groups. By all means, put pronouns in your bio if you feel called to it.
Oh, that's been done for months.
Put it in your email signature if you feel called to it. Put it in your Skype name if you feel called to it, but only if you're also doing the work. Like only if you're also advocating for change. Like you could do it at local government, you could do it in your own group. A really good way is to hold yourself accountable. So like when you accidentally make a mistake, instead of editing the language, just post for your group or on social media and be like, so my last post, I accidentally used problematic language and I want to take an opportunity to talk about what I've just learned. And be willing to take the hit. Some people are going to leave. Some people are going to say bad things to you, about what you believe in, because inclusivity is hard. And bigots are some of the loudest, most hurt, most angry people on the internet, and they don't mind spreading that around. So it takes a bit of thick skin.
I can see people post things in their stories like, oh no, but stop trying to like change men and women. Like if you're a man, and mention wear dress. Every time I'm like, unfollow, bye. Like I don't even if you were going to invest with me, I don't need it. I don't want it. Like that does not feel good for me. And I feel that's why like in the podcast, I want to talk about these things because I'm like, there are things that I can't address in my coaching, but I want to talk about it. Like it lights me up talking with other people about these things and also giving ways for people to support it. You know, like I have an Indigenous friend who's going to come on who works with a lot of Indigenous youth. And at the end of each of those episodes, well, how can I support you? How can I support this? Having the links available so that like that. And then like I said it at the beginning of the Black Lives Matter, like every time I do a group program, like I've taken the commitment that I want to give 10% back to organisms that I
words are hard. It's fine.
Can't do it all. Like I can't be open to everybody, which I love that you talk about. There's a difference between your niche and who you support online. This is your real
you
life.
can be open to everyone on your podcast, but not in your coaching. It's not safe for you to be open to everyone. You'd be putting yourself in a place of risk and vulnerability that wouldn't feel comfortable or authentic to you. That doesn't mean that you're a not inclusive person, because women's spaces, men's spaces, and queer spaces are still very important spaces, because they're spaces where no one's on guard, or they're on guard a little less, because some of us, we have baggage. But like, as soon as you put a question mark into the mix, then someone feels unsafe. Inclusivity is about safety, and your threshold of inclusion is where you fit. And maybe 10 years from now, you will include everybody, but you won't be the same person as you are right now. And there's no shame in that. But personally, you can include everyone. right?
Mhm.
So learning, because that's what it is we as healers, as helpers, as coaches, as artists, as creators, we have a hard time separating ourselves from our work. You can be inclusive in your life and have a hard, fast, these people are not allowed in my space because they're not for you, not because you hate them. That's the difference. It's like, do you need some resources? I'll absolutely give them to you, but my group is not a safe place for you, and you're not like you don't even have to be like, all the people in my group would be really uncomfortable. Just be like, my group isn't a safe space for you because there's a lot of trauma affected people who would be triggered by you being there. Is there another way I can help you? Do you want me to find somewhere to connect you to? Can I give you any resources? Like, there's ways to be inclusive without being like, yeah, come in my group, where now everyone's gonna feel really uncomfortable, right?
Okay. Yeah,
So like,
that
I'm not gonna invite a dude bro to my group. It's not gonna happen ever. But if a dude bro wants to get one-on-one services with me, I'd totally be down for that. I ain't got no problem. I can probably speak their language. So yeah, I am planning on doing a couple more of these mini workshops. So if you could, both of you, because you're still here, and everyone watching, if you could send me an email of things that you would like me to go deeper on, let me know. Things that maybe we missed or things that we went over too quickly and you would like to spend a lot more time on, let me know, because this is just the beginning. I know it. I know this is like I said, when I was advertising this talk, that it's just the gate. Like there's so much to consider. So much to consider. So thank you for being here. It's 7:32. I have to go and make sure the toddler is in bed because Olivia's a pushover. I love her, but this is the first time she's ever taken care of a child and I'm outside. It's great. So thank you so much for being here. Let me know if there's anything else I can do. I'm going to send out the recording tomorrow. And the more resources if I find them on my computer. Bye for now. It was so fun. I love this. Okay.
it really was.
Bye, Deb.
Bye.